The rain was relentless, hammering the windshield in deafening sheets as we wound along the deserted mountain road outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The rhythmic swish of the wipers barely cut through the dark chaos. In the back seat, I pressed my forehead to the cold window, tracing shaky lines in the condensation with my finger. Anything to distract me from a gnawing sense of dread curling tighter in my chest. Dad. My voice barely rose above the storm. Where are we going? No answer. Only the white-knuckled grip of my father on the steering wheel, the cold profile of my mother staring rigidly ahead as lightning fractured the sky into brutal flashes. I shifted uncomfortably. My legs trembled weakly. My medication had worn off hours ago, and the tremors were starting, sharp spasms running from my spine to my fingertips. Mom, I whispered, leaning forward to catch her eye in the rearview mirror. I need my dose early. I am not feeling right. You'll be fine. Her voice was so flat, so mechanical, I recoiled instinctively. I stared at her, at the woman who used to braid my hair, kiss my scraped knees, sing lullabies when my muscles locked into cramps as a child. We turned onto a narrow dirt road, the tires sinking deep into mud. No streetlights, no houses, just endless rows of towering pines and darkness stretching like an ocean around us. Something inside me snapped awake. The air in the car wasn't just tense anymore, it was dangerous. The car jolted to a stop on the shoulder. Get out. My father's voice was sharp, cruel. I blinked at him, confused. W what? The rain came down harder now, cold bullets soaking through the cracked window seal. This isn't funny, I said nervously, thinking, hoping this was some twisted joke. It's pouring. I can't even walk without help. What are you talking about? My father turned off the engine. Slowly, methodically. Then he got out, slammed the door, and came around to mine. The door yanked open. Rain and wind attacked my skin. Get out. I stared up at him, stunned. Dad, please, whatever I did, I'll do better, I swear, I'll be good. His fingers clamped onto my thin arm, wrenching me out of the car like I weighed nothing at all. I stumbled, knees collapsing into thick, freezing mud. The tremors overtook me at once, violent, humiliating. You're a burden, Mara. His words sliced deeper than the cold. We've done everything. Doctors, specialists, money, years wasted. I looked at my mother, silently pleading. Her expression didn't change. She couldn't even meet my eyes. The insurance ran out. The donations dried up. You're killing us. The last word hung in the air like a sentence. My father shoved a backpack at me, a pathetic collection of essentials tossed into a cheap school bag. It splashed into a puddle beside me, soaking through immediately. I gasped through chattering teeth. You're leaving me here? Neither of them spoke. My father slammed the trunk, walked back around, and slid into the driver's seat. My mother followed. The taillights flared against the wall of rain, and then faded into the distance without so much as a goodbye. I lay motionless in the mud, shaking, drenched, unable to stand. The bitter realization sank into my bones along with the rainwater. They left me to die, alone, utterly alone. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes? Hours? The storm blurred time into something meaningless. I drifted in and out of consciousness as cold mud soaked through my thin jeans and sweater. Every spasm that racked my body felt like a final betrayal. I had always known I was sick, but I had never believed I was disposable. A pair of headlights appeared far in the distance. I forced my trembling arm upward, waving weakly, praying for a miracle. The vehicle slowed as it approached the crumpled shape of my body on the side of the road, then kept going. The wave of hopelessness that crashed over me was worse than the cold. I laid my head down, shivering violently, eyelids growing heavier. Maybe this was it. Maybe they had gotten what they wanted after all. Footsteps. I barely registered them over the relentless pounding of rain. Steady, heavy, purposeful. Panic jolted through my weakened frame. I had nothing left to fight with. The figure crouched beside me. A hand brushed the wet hair from my forehead, fingers rough but gentle. A voice cut through the storm, soft but urgent. Mara, Mara, stay with me. You're safe now. That voice. It couldn't be. I squinted through blurred vision, tried to speak, but the name barely slipped past my lips. Nathan. The man's face swam into focus. Older, leaner, rugged, but unmistakably him. My brother. The one who vanished when I was 8. I never forgot you, Bean. His old nickname for me made my chest constrict. I've been watching. I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't process any of it. My body betrayed me again, fading into blackness against the warmth of his chest as he carefully lifted me from the ground. The last thing I heard before unconsciousness swallowed me whole was his voice. You're safe, Mara. I've got you. The first sensation I felt was warmth, blessed warmth. A soft blanket tucked under my chin, the comforting crackle of firewood burning. I opened my eyes to dim, flickering light dancing against rustic wooden walls. I was lying on a bed piled high with thick quilts, and 4-line trailed into my arm. Panic surged for a second. Where was I? The door creaked open, and Nathan stepped inside, carrying a mug that steamed in the cold air. He had changed into dry clothes, dark thermal shirt, worn jeans, work boots caked in mud. His brown hair, longer than I remembered, curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Stubble darkened his jawline, but it was the eyes. His eyes, the same intense, deep-set blue as mine. You're awake, he said gently, setting the mug on the small nightstand. Drink. Tea with honey. It'll help your throat. I stared at him, mouth dry, brain spinning wildly. How? My voice cracked painfully. You've been gone for years. Nathan helped me sit up with practiced ease, propping pillows behind my back. I never left you, Mara. I left them. I sipped the warm liquid. It steadied my shaking hands, just enough to focus. My mind flashed back to the night he disappeared. The screaming, the slammed door, the emptiness that had swallowed our house ever since. You stood up to Dad, I whispered. It wasn't a question. Nathan nodded slowly, jaw tightening at the memory. He refused to get you the care you needed. I tried to help. It escalated fast. He threw me out. My hands clenched the blanket. I had spent 9 years thinking my brother had abandoned me, when all along he had been banished for trying to save me. Tears burned behind my eyes. I looked everywhere for you, he continued, voice heavy with regret. They blocked my calls, returned my letters unopened. I even came to your school once, but they'd told the staff I wasn't allowed near you. The years of aching emptiness, of wondering why he had disappeared, cracked and splintered under the weight of the truth. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not anymore. The days blurred into each other after that, marked by the rhythm of healing and the quiet safety of the place Nathan had built. I learned quickly that the cabin wasn't just shelter. It was a fortress hidden deep in the pine forest about an hour outside of Flagstaff. The outside looked like any ordinary weathered log home, but inside Nathan had wired it with solar panels, satellite internet routed through encrypted channels, emergency supplies, and even a backup generator hidden under what appeared to be a root cellar. I spent the first week in bed, barely able to move without trembling violently. Jade Monroe, Nathan's friend and a former military medic, visited every day from her small rural clinic 30 miles away. She was in her mid-30s, dark hair cropped short, brown eyes sharp but kind. Her no-nonsense attitude was exactly what I needed. Arms up, Jade instructed, guiding me through painful, simple movements. 10 seconds. You've already regained 5 degrees of mobility since Monday. That's progress. It didn't feel like progress. I groaned, sweat beading on my forehead. Doesn't feel like anything but agony. Jade gave me a rare smirk. Good. That means you're alive. Nathan entered carrying a basket of carrots and radishes, still dusted with earth. His clothes were streaked with dirt, and he smelled faintly of pine sap. How's the patient? Stubborn, Jade replied as she packed up her kit. Runs in the family. Nathan winked at me. You'll fit right in here then. When Jade left, Nathan helped me out onto the small porch. A soft breeze stirred the tall trees. From this vantage point, I could see the greenhouse, the small workshop, even a tiny stream winding lazily through the property. I leaned back against the chair, exhausted but strangely at peace. You did all this yourself? Nathan nodded. Mostly. I had help from a mentor I met in Denver. Old guy, Vietnam vet. Taught me how to live off-grid, how to build, how to disappear. You were hiding? I asked. Not hiding, just staying off their radar. It's harder for them to find you if you leave no digital footprint. I didn't ask who they were. Not yet. A cold pit had already settled in my stomach. I stared at the scar that ran across the knuckles of Nathan's right hand. A souvenir of the last fight with our father, I realized. That night, as the crackle of firewood filled the silence between us, I finally whispered the question that had haunted me for years. Why didn't you come back? Nathan exhaled slowly, staring into the flames. I tried, Mara. I tried so many times. I tracked hospital records. I checked missing persons databases. I joined online support groups for your condition under fake names, just in case you posted. They told the police and the schools I was dangerous, unfit, abusive. His hands clenched tightly around the metal cup. I couldn't risk them taking you away for good, so I waited and watched from a distance. The grief and betrayal roared up inside me like a wildfire. Years of suffering, of thinking I had been abandoned by everyone, when the truth had been twisted beyond recognition. I reached across the table and placed my trembling hand over his. You never gave up. Nathan's voice softened, thick with emotion. I never will. I closed my eyes as tears silently slid down my cheeks. For the first time in almost a decade, I allowed myself to believe something I had stopped daring to hope for. I wasn't alone anymore. The routine of safety didn't last. It never does. On the 4th week after Nathan found me, as autumn winds swept through the pine forest and the mornings grew colder, something shifted. Nathan became restless. He stopped working on the greenhouse, spent more time inside reviewing camera footage from the multiple hidden trail cams around the property. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes deepen. One evening, I woke to hushed voices. The faint glow from the computer room spilled into the dark hallway. I pulled myself up, using the cane Jade had brought for me, and moved toward the light. Nathan and Jade were standing over a monitor. I could barely hear Nathan's tight voice. They're getting too close. I cleared my throat. Both of them jumped. What's going on? I asked, heart beginning to race. Nathan sighed heavily and motioned me to sit. The screen showed grainy footage from earlier that day. A dark sedan had stopped near the edge of the property line. A tall figure in a black rain jacket walked cautiously toward the cabin, pausing, looking around, then slipping a white envelope under the door before retreating quickly back into the woods. The blood drained from my face. Who was that? Jade shook her head grimly. Not law enforcement. Not any neighbor. Whoever it was didn't want to be seen. Nathan handed me the envelope. My hands trembled as I slid the folded paper free. Just one line was typed in cold, sterile font. You were never meant to survive. Stop digging. I stared at it for a long time. The letters burned into my brain. My heart pounded violently in my chest, an icy wave of terror washing over me. Nathan reached out and took the letter, his expression darkening into something dangerous. They found us. I shook my head slowly. No, they found the cabin. They don't know what else we know, or who I've become. Nathan's mouth twitched slightly at the corners, the barest trace of a proud smile flickering behind the hard lines of tension. That's my sister. I stood shakily, gripping the cane harder than I needed to. I'm done running, Nathan. He watched me carefully. Are you sure? Once we push back, there's no pulling back into the shadows. I nodded, my voice clear despite the trembling of my limbs. They left me to die. They tried to erase me. They're going to wish they had finished the job because I won't stop now. Jade nodded approvingly. She's stronger than most soldiers I know. That night I couldn't sleep. Every branch scraping against the window sounded like a footstep. Every owl's cry twisted into the imagined whisper of someone outside. But as the fire crackled and the clock on the wall ticked on steadily, I stayed awake, determined not to let fear win. At dawn, Nathan found me still sitting at the table, staring at the white envelope. You're really not going to stop, are you? I smiled faintly, exhaustion heavy in my bones, but something new burning fiercely underneath. No, I want justice. Nathan's jaw tightened and he nodded slowly. Then we do it together. No more secrets. The letter lay between us, like a battle line. My past had tried to break me. My family had discarded me. The people behind Nexovian Therapeutics wanted me erased. I traced my fingers over the smooth paper and whispered to myself, not anymore. The next few days passed in a blur of determination and dread. Jade continued her visits, pushing me through painful physical therapy sessions. Nathan barely left his desk, surrounded by piles of bank statements, old insurance records, and documents he'd been quietly collecting for months. One chilly morning, as golden light filtered weakly through the curtains, I sat wrapped in a heavy quilt, flipping through my mother's old, leather-bound journal, the one Nathan had found hidden in a rented storage unit under her maiden name. At first, the entries were mundane, recipes, grocery lists, reminders for doctor appointments. But as the pages darkened with time, the tone shifted. The handwriting became messier, more frantic. My breath caught as I reached a single damning entry dated shortly after my 3rd birthday. Robert signed the final paperwork today. $30,000 deposited immediately, with quarterly payments to follow. The doctor explained the protocols, said risks were minimal, that our daughter would be helping other children. I should have said no. God help me, I should have said no. My vision blurred. My stomach clenched violently. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth as nausea and horror rolled through me. They had sold me, not figuratively, not emotionally. My parents had literally signed a contract with Nexovian Therapeutics when I was 3 years old, enrolling me in some experimental medical trial in exchange for money. I wasn't just sick. I had been made sick. I bolted from the bed, dragging my weakened legs toward Nathan's work desk. I slapped the open journal onto the pile of documents. Read this. My voice cracked as rage and heartbreak warred inside me. Nathan froze, scanned the page, and visibly paled. His expression hardened into something cold, almost frightening. I found this name on some of the medical forms, too, he said, pulling up files on his laptop. Nexovian Therapeutics. It's a private pharmaceutical company. They specialize in early-stage neurological treatments, and they have a history of paying off families under non-disclosure agreements. My knees buckled. I collapsed into the chair as 1,000 fragmented memories hit me at once. The strange doctors, who never stayed long. The bitter-tasting vitamins I was forced to take as a child. The painful blood draws I was told were to help you grow, sweetheart. The steady, terrifying decline of my health from the time I was a toddler. I shook my head, refusing to believe what I already knew deep inside. They experimented on me like I was a lab animal. Nathan's eyes blazed with fury. According to the records I found, the payments stopped when you were 14, right around the time your symptoms became too severe to hide anymore. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails dug painfully into my palms. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had used me, profited off me, and when the experiment failed and I became nothing but an expensive burden, they left me to die. Nathan reached across the desk, his hand warm over mine, his voice low but steady. This changes everything. This isn't just parental betrayal anymore. This is criminal. I stared at the fading Arizona sunlight filtering through the window, my heart racing. For the first time since waking up in Nathan's cabin, the heavy fog of grief and helplessness started to lift. I had been a pawn in their twisted game, but not anymore. My fingers tightened around the edge of the journal. We're going to burn their whole house of lies down, one page at a time. Nathan smiled grimly. Damn right we are. Outside, the forest stood silent and still, as if holding its breath for the reckoning to come. And it was coming. 2 days later, everything changed again. Nathan burst into the room just after dawn, breathless, clutching a worn manila folder. His voice was low but urgent. I found her. I blinked, confused and groggy. Who? Dr. Simone Laird, lead researcher on Nexovian's neurological protocols. Nathan dropped the folder on the table. She left the company under mysterious circumstances 3 years ago. Disappeared from the medical field completely. But she resurfaced last year, teaching biology at a small community college near Phoenix. My pulse quickened. You think she knows what they did to me? She was there, Nathan said grimly. If anyone can give us answers, it's her. Jade paced nervously as we prepared for the trip. I don't like this, she muttered. They already know where the cabin is. They could be watching. Nathan nodded tightly. I'll draw them off. You two take the back road south. I've already planned the routes and packed emergency supplies in the Jeep. If anything happens to me, don't say that. I cut him off sharply. My heart clenched at the thought. He smiled, faintly, resting a hand on my shoulder. I'm not going to let them stop us now, Mara. We're too close. The plan worked. Late that morning, Nathan left in the truck. We watched from the treeline as the same black SUV from the trail cameras pulled onto the road minutes later and followed him. Jade didn't wait. She helped me into her old tan Jeep, and we slipped away along the winding forest roads toward Phoenix. The hours crawled by, nerves raw with every passing car. We arrived at the meeting point just after sunset, a deserted picnic area deep inside a state park. The only sound was the wind rustling through the dry leaves and the distant chirping of cicadas. Dr. Simone Laird was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined a cold corporate scientist. Instead, she was a petite woman in her early 50s with tired hazel eyes and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. As Jade helped me slowly to the bench, Dr. Laird's expression softened with recognition. The tremors, the weakness, phase 3, she whispered under her breath. I stared at her. What do you mean? She exhaled shakily. You were part of the phase 3 trial. 27 children were enrolled. Within 5 years, 24 suffered catastrophic neurological damage. I couldn't breathe. What happened to the others? One relocated overseas. One died in a car crash. You're the last one, Mara. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Jade narrowed her eyes. Why were the trials allowed to continue? Dr. Laird looked away, shame written across her face. Pressure from investors. Timelines shortened. Safety protocols ignored. When I tried to intervene, I was forced out. They offered me money to stay silent. She shook her head bitterly. I walked away instead. She pulled a small flash drive from her coat pocket and slid it across the bench. Everything I could copy before I left. Trial records, internal memos, patient data. It won't heal you, but it might help you hold them accountable. I stared at the tiny device like it was a live grenade. Dr. Laird's phone buzzed suddenly. She paled. Without speaking, she showed us the message. Unknown car asking for you at your apartment. Claimed to be brother. No brother listed. Get out now. Dr. Laird shoved the flash drive into my hand and stood abruptly. You have to go. Now. Jade didn't waste a second. She helped me to my feet, half carrying me back to the Jeep. As we sped out of the park under cover of darkness, I stared at the precious piece of plastic in my hand, my heart racing with terror and hope. The truth was finally ours, and now they knew we had it. The drive back to Flagstaff felt endless. Every pair of headlights behind us sent a jolt of panic through my chest. Jade kept her eyes locked on the rearview mirror, knuckles white on the steering wheel. We're not being followed, she murmured finally. Not yet. I stared down at the flash drive, turning it over in my trembling fingers. It felt impossibly light for something that could bring down an empire. When we reached the cabin just before dawn, Nathan wasn't there. His truck was gone. No note, no sign of struggle, just silence. Panic clawed at my throat. I checked my emergency phone. The cheap prepaid one Nathan had insisted I keep hidden for this exact reason. One unread message blinked back at me from an unknown number. Arrested. False charges. Lawyer needed. Storage unit on Main Street. Key under third rock from north corner. Don't come. Not safe. I gasped aloud. Jade grabbed the phone from my shaking hand and read the text. Her jaw tightened. Damn it. They got to him. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The storage unit. That's where the rest of the evidence must be. Jade nodded grimly. We can't risk waiting. If they planted someone at the cabin, they'll go for the unit next. Less than an hour later, we parked a block away from the downtown Flagstaff storage facility. It was early, barely past 6. The streets were still quiet. I stayed low in the passenger seat while Jade slipped across the parking lot and retrieved the small silver key from under the designated rock. We moved quickly down the row of units until we reached number 138. The key clicked in the lock. Inside was a plain metal filing cabinet bolted to the back wall. Jade yanked open the drawers as I kept watch nervously outside. The files were there, neatly organized in Nathan's meticulous handwriting. Bank withdrawals, insurance claims, copies of my medical history, even time-stamped photos of my parents driving away the night they abandoned me. At the bottom of the last drawer was a thick legal envelope with my name scrawled across it. I opened it slowly, handshaking. Inside were legal documents, a fully completed emancipation filing, an emergency petition for guardianship transfer, notarized witness statements, everything I would need to declare legal independence for my parents and press charges. Nathan had planned for this. Tears pricked my eyes as relief and guilt washed over me. He had known how far they would go. He had prepared for the worst, and it had come true. We returned to the Jeep, and Jade immediately called a contact of hers, a civil rights attorney in Phoenix who had worked with whistleblowers before. Within minutes, we had a plan. That night, back at the cabin, I sat at the wooden table under the soft yellow glow of a single lamp. My mother's journal lay open beside me. The threatening note from the stranger at the cabin rested next to the flash drive. I stared at both as Jade made tea in the small kitchen. So many pieces had fallen into place. I was no longer the helpless girl they had discarded. I was something far more dangerous now. A girl with proof. The fear still hovered at the edges of my mind. I had no idea what they would do next. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done hiding. They wanted me erased. I whispered into the silence. But I'm still here. Jade came to stand beside me, resting a firm hand on my shoulder. They made a mistake, Mara. I glanced up at her. What mistake? They underestimated what happens when survivors fight back. The steps of the Coconino County Courthouse loomed ahead like the walls of a fortress. My cane tapped sharply against the stone as Jade guided me up, step by agonizing step. The sun blazed high above Flagstaff's crisp morning air, but I barely felt its warmth. My heart pounded louder than the reporter's questions echoing across the plaza. Are you the missing girl? Is it true you're suing your own parents? Did Nexovian experiment on you as a child? I stared straight ahead, refusing to flinch. Jade walked firmly beside me, shielding me from the barrage. We had deliberately chosen to go public today, to ensure there would be too many eyes for them to make me disappear quietly. Nathan's lawyer had called it insurance. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Reporters filled every seat, their pens scratching furiously over notepads. Across the aisle sat my parents, stony-faced and cold, pretending they didn't know the daughter they had once dragged to doctor after doctor, then left like trash on a wet roadside. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, called the room to order. My attorney began to speak. I barely heard him as he laid out the allegations: medical exploitation, parental neglect, insurance fraud, child endangerment. The words barely registered. I was too focused on what I held tightly in my lap. When it was my turn, I rose slowly from my chair, gripping the cane tightly. My legs wobbled, but held. I stood unassisted for the first time in months. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My name is Mara Whitfield, I said, voice cracking slightly before strengthening. 3 weeks ago, my parents abandoned me on a remote road outside Flagstaff, leaving me to die because of my chronic illness. I locked eyes with my mother across the room. For once, she looked away. What the world did not know, I continued, was that my illness wasn't natural. It was the result of unauthorized experimental treatments I received as a child without genuine informed consent under a contract signed by my parents and Nexovian Therapeutics. I reached down and lifted the document Nathan had so carefully preserved. I held it high for the judge and cameras to see. This is the original agreement. They received over $400,000 over the course of my childhood in exchange for turning me into a human test subject. The courtroom erupted into shocked murmurs. The judge banged her gavel repeatedly for order. I stood my ground. 27 children were enrolled in Nexovian's Phase 3 trials. 24 suffered catastrophic side effects. I am one of only 3 to survive into adulthood. The others cannot speak for themselves, but I can. I handed over the flash drive Dr. Laird had given me. This contains internal emails, research data, and suppressed clinical findings, showing Nexovian knowingly ignored safety warnings in favor of profits. The judge glanced at the bailiff, who took it carefully. Silence fell heavy in the room. My voice softened but carried. I am not here for revenge. I am here for justice for myself and for every child whose life was stolen. As I turned to return to my seat, pain seared through my legs. I gritted my teeth and kept walking, step by defiant step, back to the table. Cameras clicked wildly. The courtroom held its collective breath. Outside, social media exploded. #Justice for Mara trended worldwide within hours. Victims from other families stepped forward with eerily similar stories. Nexovian's stock plummeted. 2 days later, Nathan walked free. The bogus charges evaporated under the weight of public outrage and media scrutiny. As we exited the courthouse together, reporters flooded toward us. Nathan wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders, steering me past the chaos. "You did it," he whispered into my hair. "You broke the wall they built around you." I leaned into him, exhausted but alive. For the first time in my life, I felt something deeper than survival. Victory. A year later, I stood at the edge of a wide clearing surrounded by towering pines, watching workers install the final piece of the hand-carved sign, the Mara Whitfield Medical Justice Center. I traced my fingers over the smooth letters as they fixed it into place. The property had changed so much since that first cold night Nathan had carried me here. The simple survival cabin had expanded into a refuge. A greenhouse, walking paths for therapy, counseling offices, even small cottages for victims of medical exploitation who had nowhere else to go. We had started with nothing, only evidence, outrage, and sheer determination. But the moment I stood in that courtroom, we unlocked something more powerful: belief. Donations had poured in from around the world. Survivors had rallied. Lawyers, doctors, volunteers had offered their help. Nexovian didn't survive. The company folded under the weight of lawsuits, federal investigations, and criminal charges. The executives who had once viewed me as just data points and dollar signs now faced prison sentences. As for my parents, they lost everything: their home, their retirement accounts, their public reputations. My mother's cold, carefully crafted facade had finally crumbled. Last I heard, she had left Arizona altogether under a cloud of disgrace. I leaned on my cane and smiled faintly at the irony. They had called me a burden. Now the center bore my name. "Looks good," Nathan's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to see him walking toward me. At 29, the lines of stress that had once marked his face had softened. His broad frame and easy stride spoke of the hard work he'd thrown himself into. "You did this," he said simply. "We did this," I corrected. I still needed the cane on long days, but I could walk most mornings without it now. A miracle none of my former doctors had believed possible. Inside the main house, which doubled as our administrative center and home, Jade was reviewing paperwork. She had left her small clinic to run our trauma recovery program. Her experience as a combat medic had made her uniquely suited to help people heal, not just physically, but emotionally. Later that afternoon, Jade called out from the porch, holding a thin envelope. "Mara, a letter for you." The return address made my stomach twist. County Hospice Center. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. "Mara, the doctors say I have weeks left. Lung cancer. I know you won't forgive me. I don't deserve it. But before I go, I needed you to know you were always the strongest person I've ever known. What we did was unforgivable. Your father called it survival. It was greed. Plain and simple. The woman you've become, the one standing up and helping others, that was never us. That was you. Always you." Ellen Whitfield. I folded the paper back into its envelope, stunned by the emptiness I felt. No anger, no sadness, just acceptance that some bridges should stay burned. That night, as the sun bled into the sky in soft streaks of gold and purple, I asked Nathan the question I had avoided for months. We sat together on the wide front porch, watching the fireflies flicker against the trees. "How did you know they were going to leave me that night?" He stared into the distance before answering softly. "I'd been tracking them for weeks. Their purchases, the way they drained your medical fund slowly, trying not to raise red flags. The sudden sale of the house. I knew they were planning something. I just didn't know what." "You could have called the police," I whispered. He shook his head. "And tell them what? That I had a feeling? No. I needed to catch them in the act. I followed the car. When I saw them drag you out and drive off, I nearly rammed their car off the road. But then I saw you collapsed in that ditch, and all that mattered was getting you safe." I blinked back unexpected tears. "Why, Nathan? After everything? Why risk everything for me?" His reply was quiet, unshakable. "Because you were never a burden to me." The words settled deep into my heart, filling the space that betrayal had once hollowed out. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was home. The following day, I stood at the podium of the small town hall where the city council had invited me to speak. The same city where a year earlier I had crawled through cold mud, thinking my life was over. Now I stood tall, still thin, still unsteady, but standing. The room was packed. Survivors, advocates, volunteers, and strangers who had followed our story and showed up just to say, "You gave me hope." Nathan and Jade stood at the back of the room. I drew strength from their presence. I took a breath and began, my voice steady. A year ago, I was left to die by the people who should have protected me. They viewed me as a burden, something to be discarded. They broke every vow of family, compassion, and decency. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. But I survived. And in losing the family I thought I had, I found my true home. In facing betrayal, I found a strength I never knew existed. In fighting for others, I found purpose. I looked directly at a young girl sitting in the front row, wearing leg braces, her mother's arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders. And to anyone who has ever been told they are worthless, inconvenient, or too broken to matter, I'm here to tell you that they were wrong. You matter. Your life matters. Your voice matters. I glanced toward Nathan, who gave me the smallest of nods. When they left me, they thought they ended my story. Instead, they lit the fire that turned me into the person standing here today. The crowd erupted into applause, some people rising to their feet, others dabbing at tears. I stepped down slowly, heart racing, but light for the first time in years. That evening, I walked alone to the far edge of the property. The full moon floated above the trees, casting silver light across the sanctuary that had saved me. My legs shook with fatigue, but I refused the wheelchair waiting at the porch. I wanted these few precious steps to be mine. I gazed up at the vast canvas of stars. I felt small, yes, but also infinite. A single life among billions, yet a life that now held purpose far beyond merely surviving. Footsteps crunched softly behind me. Nathan approached, his coat draped over his arm, concern flickering in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked gently. "It's getting cold." I smiled faintly, tears prickling behind my lashes. "I'm more than okay. I'm home." We stood together under the moon, two survivors of different storms who had found refuge in each other. The path ahead would never be easy. My condition would always be with me. The fight for justice would continue, sometimes painfully, sometimes slowly. But for the first time, I faced the future not with fear, but with fierce, unshakable hope. I turned back toward the cabin, toward the center that bore my name. As I walked forward, step by trembling step, I whispered the words that had carried me from that muddy roadside to this moment. They left me to die, but I lived. I lived. It was a Friday afternoon in late October, just after 4 p.m., when I pulled into the driveway and noticed the envelope taped to our front door. A large manila folder, the kind Mark used to keep house project plans in. Except this one had my name scrawled across the front in bold, uneven ink. Vanessa. No honey, no V, just my name. Cold. Isolated. Lucy barked once from the back seat, tail wagging, unaware her world was about to unravel along with mine. I grabbed the envelope with trembling fingers, trying not to imagine what it contained, but my heart knew before I even stepped inside. The house was silent, too silent. No ambient music playing from the kitchen speaker. No low hum of Mark's sander from the garage. Just the creak of floorboards as I crossed the threshold. I dropped my purse, set Lucy's leash free, and stood there in the hallway, staring at the package like it might explode. I opened it with a letter opener from the drawer. Inside were dozens of printed screenshots, messages between me and Julian, our secret Facebook accounts, coded texts, flirty banter, and at the very back a note, written in my daughter's handwriting. "You're not the mother I thought you were. Don't contact me again. Sienna." That was the moment something inside me collapsed. Not cracked, not bent, collapsed. I sank to the floor, the envelope slipping from my hands like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Lucy patted over and nudged my arm, whining softly, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened like it had been sewn shut with invisible thread. Not Sienna. Anyone but her. I tried to stand, but my knees buckled. I crawled to the living room rug and curled up into myself, shielding my body as if from an attack, though no one was there. Just my mistakes. Just my lies. Just my daughter's silence echoing louder than any scream. I don't know how long I lay there. An hour? Maybe 2. The sun had dipped low behind the mountains by the time I sat upright, dazed and cold. I reached for my phone with a frantic desperation, dialing Mark first. Straight to voicemail. Then Sienna. Then Aiden. Voicemail. 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 I didn't even try Julian. I knew that door was already closed, maybe even bolted shut on both ends. I texted Mark simply, "Please call me. I can explain." Nothing. I followed it with, "I love you. Please don't shut me out. Please." Still nothing. The next ping I received wasn't from any of them. It was from a blocked number, just minutes before 7 p.m. "Vanessa, I know everything. So do the kids. So does my mother. Your parents, too, as of 15 minutes ago. I've moved out. I'll be in touch through my attorney only. Enjoy your new life." Mark, I read it, then reread it, then felt the words burn through my retinas. He told everyone. My children. His mother. My parents. Even my father, who once told me I'd always be his best girl. What would he think now? I screamed into the silence. Loud. Gut-wrenching. Ugly. It was the kind of scream you didn't care if the neighbors heard. The kind of scream that came from knowing you'd finally gone too far. Upstairs, our bedroom door stood open. I walked toward it slowly as if walking through water. There, on the neatly made bed, was a white gift box with a thick red ribbon. My name was written on the tag. Inside, divorce papers. Not just documents, a declaration. That my family was over. That I had detonated everything. I clutched the box to my chest, fell to my knees, and wept like a child. I wish I could say that was the worst part, but the silence that followed that was worse. The silence of a family disappearing. Not with shouting, not with fury, but with absence. The kind of silence that wraps around your throat and whispers, "This is what you deserve." It's strange what the mind chooses to hold on to when everything else falls apart. In the middle of that unbearable silence, with divorce papers still sitting in the box beside me, I found myself remembering something so ordinary it was from the first week of April, just 6 months earlier. Mark had built me a new garden bench. It wasn't fancy, just reclaimed wood and natural stain, but it was perfect. He'd spent 2 weekends sanding it smooth and carving tiny mountain peaks into the backrest, knowing how I loved the way the Rockies looked at dusk. He never said anything poetic about it. He just grinned, handed me a glass of sweet tea, and said, "Try not to break this one when you get dramatic." And I had laughed. Genuinely. Back then, things were whole. Not perfect. No one's marriage ever really is, but steady. Comfortable. Safe. Mark worked as a lead consultant for a firm that specialized in eco-friendly construction. He'd helped rebuild schools after the Marshall Fire, and half the town still stopped him at the grocery store to thank him. I was proud of him, maybe too proud. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking he could ever be vulnerable or hurt. Our kids, Sienna and Aiden, were both away at college. They'd left that past August for the University of Washington, Sienna majoring in environmental policy like her father, Aiden trying his hand at engineering like he was born to build things. They shared a dorm floor, called us every Sunday, sent us blurry pictures of cafeteria tacos and campus squirrels. We missed them. Mark and I used to laugh at how quiet the house had gotten. I filled that quiet with Lucy, our golden retriever. She was only 4, but had the wisdom of a dog, twice her age. Every Tuesday and Thursday, on the days I didn't work from home for my interior design clients, I'd take her to the dog park just north of Mapleton Avenue, a small patch of fenced grass near the luxury apartments that towered too high over the neighborhood, all glass and cold metal. That's where I met Julian. It was early July. Summer had just settled in properly. Dry heat in the afternoons, the kind that baked the sidewalks but left the shade deliciously cool. I remember Lucy bounding toward another dog with wild excitement, and I followed, leash in hand, only to find myself standing across from a tall man in designer joggers and a heather gray hoodie, holding a retractable leash of his own. His dog, a border collie named Nico, was as sleek and perfectly behaved as a show dog. They made quite the pair. "Mine's the wild one," I said, breathless. "She thinks everyone's her best friend." Julian smiled, the kind of smile that feels rehearsed but still lands. "Nico could use a little wild. He's basically a furry accountant." We laughed. It was harmless. Just two strangers with dogs. Just two people passing time. Over the next few weeks, I saw him often. Always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We started sitting on the same bench, letting the dogs run while we talked about nothing. Books, the heat, the best local coffee. It never felt like a flirtation. I even mentioned him to Mark, told him about this guy Julian with a dog that acts like a tax lawyer. Mark had chuckled and asked if Lucy was flirting again. I wish that had been the end of it, but the bench at the park became a kind of sanctuary. Somewhere I didn't have to be a wife or a mom or even Vanessa Cole. I could just exist. Listen to someone talk about their podcast ideas or their terrible landlord or what kind of sandwich Nico liked best. And then one day, maybe mid-August, Julian asked me a question that would change everything. "Have you ever seen the view from my apartment rooftop?" He said it casually, like someone offering gum. And I, foolish, lonely, maybe just curious, asked, "Which building?" "The tall one," he replied, nodding toward the glass tower just beyond the fence. "Penthouse floor." Something in me stirred. Not lust, not excitement. Something more dangerous. The craving to be unseen. To vanish from my own life for just a moment. "I should probably get home," I said, already regretting the pause that had come before it. He didn't push. Just smiled again like he knew I'd be back. And God help me, I was. We always think affairs begin with a kiss. They don't. They begin with a conversation we shouldn't linger in. A silence we let stretch too long. A door we don't quite close behind us. The next time we met at the park, it was early August. The air had turned drier, crisp in the mornings, but the sun still hung heavy in the afternoons. Julian wore the same hoodie he always did, gray, with a faded logo I never bothered to read. I wore Mark's flannel, the sleeves rolled twice, my hair tied up in a bun I hadn't refreshed since breakfast. We were sitting on the bench again, Lucy sprawled at my feet, Nico obedient as ever by Julian's side. I remember he handed me a cold bottle of water, unopened. "You looked flushed," he said. That shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. It felt like someone noticing me, not just seeing me, but registering me. And that was the first line I crossed, quietly without realizing. The second came later that week. It was Thursday, August 10th. I remember the date because it was the same day Mark sent me a photo of a new custom table he was building for a client, one with a hidden drawer. "For secrets," he joked. I didn't laugh. I didn't reply for 2 hours. That morning, Julian had waited near the far gate of the dog park instead of sitting. He waved me over. "Hey, random," he said. "Want to see something cool?" I should have said no, but I followed him, Lucy trotting ahead as if she already knew the path. We walked just 2 blocks to his apartment building, a towering, modern slab of steel and glass, a contrast to the warm timber of my home. "Come up for 5 minutes," Julian said. "You've got to see the city from up here." The elevator ride was quiet. I kept telling myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just being curious, just being neighborly, just being stupid. His apartment was pristine. White counters, chrome fixtures, glass doors that opened onto a balcony with a view so sweeping it looked fake. I stood there, speechless. Julian offered to take a photo of Lucy against the backdrop of the mountains. I handed him my phone. Afterward, he showed me around, kitchen, study, bedroom. Everything curated. Clean, not lived in. I stayed exactly 11 minutes. When I got home, I said nothing to Mark. But I made his favorite lemon chicken that night, lit a candle, played old jazz while we ate. He looked up once during dinner and smiled. "What's the occasion?" "Just Thursday," I replied. That was the moment I began cheating. Not physically, not yet, but spiritually, mentally, I had stepped into another life, and the door behind me didn't close. In the weeks that followed, things escalated fast. Julian texted me often, through our fake names, Eva and Jack. Just playful messages at first, then longer, more suggestive ones. Soon, he stopped texting and started inviting. Tuesdays, Thursdays, always when Mark was at work, always when Lucy needed her walk. The first time it happened, our first time, it was September 5th, a Tuesday. I remember it clearly because it rained that morning and I almost canceled. But Julian insisted, rain makes it cozy. I lied to Mark that day, told him I had an unexpected design consult in Denver. He kissed my cheek and handed me a thermos of coffee for the road. Julian didn't have coffee waiting. He had music playing, slow, deliberate, and wine open before noon. It was awkward, hesitant, then it wasn't. I didn't cry afterward. I didn't feel guilt, not then. What I felt was electricity, the rush of being someone else. Someone desired, chosen, unburdened by titles like wife or mother or Mrs. Cole. That night I came home early. I made Mark a steak dinner. Watched his eyes soften as he told me about a difficult client. I nodded in all the right places, laughed when he needed me to, touched his hand across the table. We made love that night, and as terrible as it sounds, I was more attentive than I'd been in months. Mark didn't question it. He simply pulled me closer and whispered, "I've missed you." And I closed my eyes and lied to his face. By the third week of September, the affair had settled into a routine. Tuesdays and Thursdays, late mornings to early afternoons. I'd leave the house in workout clothes, leash Lucy, and text Mark something breezy like, taking her to the park, might swing by the co-op after. He always responded with a thumbs-up emoji or a quick drive safe. Never suspicion, never doubt. He trusted me completely, and that was the part that began to hurt. I remember one Thursday in particular, September 21st. Julian and I had just finished lunch in his apartment, the takeout containers still warm on the counter. We hadn't even put them away. I sat by the balcony door, staring out over the mountains, and he asked, "Do you ever think about leaving?" "Leaving what?" "Your life. Starting fresh. You're too smart and too young to be caged." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "I'm not caged, Julian. I chose this life. I built it." "Yeah," he said, stepping closer, his voice lowering. "But are you still in love with it?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how. That night, I brought home sunflowers from the market. Mark was sanding a bench in the garage when I arrived. I kissed his cheek, handed him the bouquet, and said, "Just because." He looked at me for a moment, really looked and smiled. But there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not warmth, not suspicion, something colder, calculating. I told myself I imagined it. The first real shift came the following week. Mark stopped texting during the day. No more mid-morning updates. No check-ins about dinner. Just silence. When I asked if everything was okay, he said he was swamped at work. Some green roofing proposal had hit a wall and needed reworking. I offered to bring lunch to the office. He declined. That Friday, he came home after 8 p.m. for the third time that week, claiming they were pulling late hours on a sustainability grant presentation. I believed him because I needed to, because I couldn't bear the irony of suspecting my husband of lying while I was sleeping with another man. But then came the coldness. Mark stopped reaching for me in bed. He stopped lingering after kisses. He stopped saying, "I love you" first. It wasn't dramatic, just quieter, emptier, like someone slowly backing out of a room without shutting the door behind them. And still I kept going to Julian, because in that silence I panicked. I clung harder. I played the doting wife even more. I cleaned the house obsessively, cooked elaborate meals I didn't eat, left sticky notes in Mark's briefcase with reminders like "You're amazing" and "Dinner's your favorite tonight." It was love bombing. I knew it, but I couldn't stop, because part of me knew the countdown had started. Then came October 6th. Mark didn't come home at all. I called twice. No answer. I texted, "Everything okay?" No reply. At 10:37 p.m., I got a single message. "Still at the office. Don't wait up." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I thought he was cheating. I would have deserved that, but because I knew something was happening behind the curtain. A shift. A pulling away. I sat in the kitchen, Lucy curled at my feet, and stared at our wedding photo on the fridge. Mark in a gray suit, me in a simple ivory dress, hair pinned with mountain laurel. We looked young, hopeful, invincible. Now I could feel it, the rope between us unraveling, thread by thread. Julian messaged me that weekend. "You seem distant. Everything okay?" I didn't reply, because for the first time in weeks, I didn't want him. I wanted Mark. I wanted my husband to look at me again, like I was still the woman who knew the sound of his laughter and the rhythm of his heartbeat. But I had already traded all that for an afternoon view and a voice that told me I wasn't caged. And I was beginning to realize the cage wasn't Mark. It was me. October 20th, 2023. I remember the sky was overcast that morning, the kind of heavy gray that makes you feel like the day is holding its breath. I had taken Lucy out early, hoping to clear my mind before work. I was supposed to have a client consult at 11 a.m., but I canceled it last minute. My stomach had been churning since the night before, and I couldn't name why not yet. By the time I got home around 4 p.m., the envelope was already there, taped directly to the front door. The moment I saw my name, sharp and angry in blue ink, I knew. I knew this wasn't a bill or a flyer or a note from a neighbor. I knew it was the end because only endings show up like that, silent, unannounced, final. Inside the manila envelope were over 30 pages of printed screenshots. Messages between me and Julian. Our fake Facebook accounts. Hotel confirmations. A selfie I had stupidly taken of my feet up on his balcony railing. The city lights behind me. Something I never posted, but somehow he had it. At the very back of the stack was a single folded sheet of lined notebook paper. No header. No signature. Just 4 sentences, written in Sienna's distinct cursive. "You're not the mother I thought you were. I don't want to speak to you. I don't want to see you. I don't want to know who you become." I read it twice. Then I dropped the whole thing on the floor, knelt in the entryway, and tried to breathe. But the air wouldn't come. It was like drowning in open air. I don't remember how long I stayed there. Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe an hour. Lucy curled up beside me, sensing something had broken. Not bent. Broken. When I finally found the strength to stand, I went upstairs to the bedroom, our bedroom, and found the box. White, square, pristine, tied with a deep red ribbon. Inside, divorce papers. A formal cover letter from Mark's attorney. A neatly typed summary of assets. A checklist of upcoming court dates. No photos. No keepsakes. Just a legal exorcism of a life I had spent 19 years building. I stared at the packet, then sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "No," as if that would rewind time. It didn't. Instead, my phone lit up. Blocked number. I hesitated before answering. "Vanessa," the voice said, calm, clipped, devastatingly polite. "Mark asked me to inform you that he has moved out. He signed a lease this morning. You'll be hearing from our office next week. Please do not attempt direct contact." I stammered, "Wait, he's okay?" "Please, just tell me he's okay. I'm not authorized to discuss anything personal, ma'am. But I can confirm that both of your children are aware of the situation, as are your parents." My knees gave out. I barely made it to the floor before the tears came. I tried calling Mark. No answer. I tried texting, "Please, please talk to me. Please tell me what you need me to do." Nothing. I called Sienna, then Aiden, straight to voicemail. I left messages, choking, pathetic messages, promising them everything, Explanations, apologies, silence, whatever they needed. Then, finally, came a text. From Mark. I know everything. So do the kids. So does my family. Your parents, too, as of 15 minutes ago. I've moved out. I'll be in touch through my attorney only. Enjoy your new life. I dropped the phone and screamed, not quietly, not gracefully, a raw, guttural scream that echoed through the empty house like an alarm that would never shut off. I tried calling my mom. She picked up, and before I could say a word, she started yelling. Not crying, yelling. She called me selfish, disgusting, a disgrace to our family. Then she hung up. When I called back, she didn't answer. I called Dad. He picked up. There was a long silence. I begged him to talk to me, to listen. I told him I made a mistake, but I was still his daughter. His voice cracked. I never thought, he said slowly, that you'd be the one to ruin what the rest of us worked so hard to protect. He didn't yell. He didn't say goodbye. He just hung up. That night, I sat in the kitchen with every light off, listening to the tick of the clock and Lucy's soft breathing. No one called. No one texted. And for the first time in my life, I realized what it meant to be truly alone. Not alone like no one in the room. Alone like no one left who still believes in you. The days that followed blurred together, silent, gray, and strangely mechanical. I fed Lucy. I made coffee I didn't drink. I walked past empty picture frames, too numb to take them down, too ashamed to leave them up. By October 25th, I had stopped texting the kids, stopped calling Mark, stopped hoping. Then came Sunday, October 29th, a day I hadn't realized was so close until I opened the fridge and saw the magnet that still held last year's card. Happy Mother's Day to the best woman we know, love, Sienna and Aiden. A construction paper heart still hung from its corner. I stood there, barefoot, hand resting on the handle of the fridge, heart hollowed. No texts, no flowers, no breakfast in bed, just silence, and Lucy's eyes watching me, confused by the tension in the air she couldn't name. Mother's Day had always been special in our house. Mark would cook pancakes, Sienna would make those terrible poems with too many adjectives, and Aiden would give me a hug so tight it felt like forgiveness for every mistake I'd ever made as a parent. This year there was nothing. No knock on the door. No voicemail. No note slipped under the welcome mat. I sat on the couch and watched the morning light creep across the rug like it didn't care whose day it was. I held my phone in my hand for 3 hours, waiting for it to vibrate. I even texted Aiden one word, thinking of you. He left it on read. When night finally fell, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop, out of instinct more than desire. I searched for articles about how to earn forgiveness from your children. I read every word like scripture, highlighting lines that didn't apply to me and skipping the ones that did. Somewhere in the early morning hours, I found myself staring at a blank email draft. Subject line, I'm sorry, but I didn't know how to begin. Because what was I sorry for? For the betrayal? Yes. For the lies? Of course. But also for becoming the person I never thought I'd be. The kind of woman I used to swear I'd never forgive if she were someone else's mother, someone else's wife. That night, I crawled into bed still wearing my robe, Lucy curled behind my knees, her body warm, her breath steady. And for a fleeting second, just one, I imagined it had all been a nightmare. That when I woke up, I'd find Sienna making coffee, Mark flipping pancakes, Aiden stealing bites with a fork before the syrup was even poured. But morning came, and the house was still empty. The mailbox held nothing but grocery coupons and a utility bill. The flowers on the porch had wilted, and I, Vanessa Cole, was no longer a mother anyone celebrated. Later that week, I reached out to my sister. I thought maybe she of all people would be the bridge back, the one who remembered me before all this, the one who once said I was the strongest woman she knew. She didn't answer my call, but she did reply. One line. Actions have consequences, Ness. Welcome to yours. It was the second week of November, around the 12th, I think, when I noticed something was off. I'd been exhausted for days, nauseous every morning, but I chalked it up to stress. My body had been through so much in the last month: grief, anxiety, shame. I assumed it was just more of the same, until I missed my period, and then another. On the morning of November 14th, I stood in the downstairs bathroom, staring at a plastic stick on the counter. 2 pink lines. Clear, defiant, absolute. I dropped to the cold tile floor. My stomach twisted. My brain raced. It's too late for this. I don't get to be blessed. I took 3 more tests over the next 2 days. Different brands, different stores, just in case the universe had made a mistake. But they all told me the same thing. I was pregnant. After 15 years of trying, after failed IVF, 2 miscarriages, a doctor who once gently said, "It might be time to consider peace with what you have." Now, when everything was already in ruins, I was carrying life. And I didn't know who the father was. I panicked. My first instinct was to tell Mark. But how could I? What if the child wasn't his? What if I gave him hope and it turned to ash? So instead, I did something I promised myself I'd never do again. I tried to contact Julian. He had me blocked. Our fake Facebook accounts were gone. Deleted the week after everything imploded. But I remembered where he worked, some sleek, open-concept tech firm downtown. I waited outside one morning, watching for his familiar stride, his black messenger bag, the smug slouch of his shoulders. He spotted me before I could call out. He didn't stop. He didn't even flinch. I followed him halfway up the block before he turned and hissed, "What the hell are you doing here?" I told him I was pregnant. He froze, and then he laughed, a bitter, cynical bark that cut straight through me. "You're joking." "I'm not." His face darkened. "Well, it's not mine." "I don't know that yet," I said, voice shaking. He muttered a string of curses, hands flying into his hair. "You're not going to baby trap me, Vanessa. Don't even try." "I'm not trapping anyone," I snapped. "I just need to know. That's it." He looked away. "It's not mine." "You don't know that." "I do. I'm asking you to take a paternity test." He scoffed. "Get Mark to raise it. That's what you wanted, right? Family back together. Perfect little miracle baby tied in a bow." I stepped closer. "If you don't come with me to the clinic, I'll walk into your HR office and tell them everything you were doing during your salaried work days." That got his attention. The next day we met at the clinic. He didn't speak a word to me. He gave his saliva. I gave my blood. It took a week to get the results. Those 7 days were hell. I barely slept. I barely ate. Every prayer I'd ever learned returned to me in desperate fragments. Please God, not his. Please God, not his. Then the call came. Julian wasn't the father. I collapsed to my knees in the kitchen, sobbing into my hands. And for the first time in weeks, I whispered a thank you to the silence. Mark still had me blocked. I didn't even know where he was living. I sent Sienna and Aiden a single message. "I have something important to tell you. Please call." Sienna replied first. "What is it?" "I'll tell you both at the same time." That evening, we had a 3-way call. My voice trembled as I said it. "I'm pregnant. It's your father's child." Silence. Then Sienna said, "No, it's his child. That guy. The one you destroyed our family for." "It's not," I said. "I had the test. Julian isn't the father." "Sure," Aiden muttered. "Because you say so." "No," I said. "I had it done at a lab. I have the paperwork." Neither believed me. "You're trying to trap Dad," Sienna said coldly. "He's finally free, and you're using a baby to reel him back in." "I'm not." My voice broke. "This wasn't planned. I would never," Aiden cut in. "We'll ask Dad. Let him decide if he wants to talk to you." And they hung up. Just like that. I didn't sleep that night, either. But in the morning, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Mark's attorney. She confirmed he was aware of the pregnancy, and he wanted a formal paternity test. He wouldn't come to the clinic with me. He wouldn't speak to me directly, but he'd give a sample. Privately. Legally. I agreed. I scheduled the test. Paid for it myself. Mark never showed up, but his attorney later confirmed the test was done. Results would arrive in 5 days. 5 days of pacing, of panic, of hope clawing at my throat. And then, confirmation. Mark was the father. I clutched the envelope like it was scripture. I wanted to run, to find him, to scream through whatever walls he'd built around his heart. But all I could do was wait. December arrived like a judgment, sharp, cold, unforgiving. The first snowfall hit on the 3rd. I remember watching it from the kitchen window as flakes drifted silently past the empty wind chimes. I used to love snow. Mark would build ridiculous igloos in the backyard with Aiden. Sienna would beg to decorate the porch with string lights before Thanksgiving even ended. Winter used to mean warmth. Now it felt like punishment. On December 5th, I received a certified letter from Mark's attorney. It was official. He was proceeding with the divorce. Despite the confirmed paternity, despite everything I'd said, everything I'd promised, he was cutting all legal ties. Clean, surgical, final. The letter was polite, emotionless, just like the man I'd once called my home. But what broke me, what truly shattered me, was the court date. December 19th, the week before Christmas. We used to have a tradition, Mark, the kids, and I. We'd open one gift on the 19th every year, a silly thing, something small. Socks, candy, a shared inside joke. We called it Just Because Day. It wasn't even about the holiday. It was about love. Now it was the date I would sign my family away. I called his attorney's office 3 times that week. Not to contest the divorce, no. I had accepted that part. I just wanted one conversation with him. Just one moment to explain, to apologize out loud, without papers between us. Each time I was denied. The only response I got was through email. Mr. Cole is not open to direct contact. All communications must go through this office. I wrote him a letter anyway. Handwritten. 6 pages. I didn't beg. I didn't grovel. I just told him the truth. About the emptiness, the self-doubt, the longing to feel alive, the sickness I felt now every time I thought of Julian's name. I told him about the baby, about how I had wanted this child for so long, but never like this, never through betrayal. I ended the letter with, "You don't have to forgive me. You don't even have to see me again. But please know this baby is yours. And so is my deepest regret." I never got a reply. December 19th came. I wore black, not because it was formal, but because it felt like a funeral. The courthouse was nearly empty, just a few clerks, a sleepy security guard, and us on opposite ends of a sterile hallway. Mark didn't look at me. Not once. When we entered the mediation room, he sat straight, eyes fixed forward, face carved from stone. The lawyer spoke, we signed, and just like that, it was done. 17 minutes. 19 years. Gone. At the end of the meeting, I asked to speak with him. Just briefly. In private. He nodded, finally. We stepped into an empty side room. The door clicked shut behind us. I turned to him, heart pounding. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" he asked, voice flat. "For being there. For helping me raise Sienna and Aiden. For giving me this child, even if," his voice cut through mine, "this child deserves better than what you gave the rest of us." I nodded. I had no defense. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "I don't hate you, Vanessa. I just don't know you anymore, and I don't want to." I didn't cry. Not until he left the room. Not until I was truly, fully alone. By Christmas, the house was half empty. Mark took his tools, his books, the framed photograph of the kids at Lake Dillon. The kids stayed with him for the holiday. They didn't call. No presents. No cards. No carols. Just snow outside the window and a stack of unopened baby onesies in the corner. I told myself to be strong. for the baby, but I was drowning in silence, and no one was reaching in to pull me out. January 26th, 2024. The day my son was born. It was snowing again, thicker this time, relentless. The kind of storm that makes everything feel suspended, like the world has stopped breathing for a moment just to witness something sacred. Or tragic. My water broke at 2:43 a.m. I was alone. No one to wake. No bag packed. No hand to squeeze. Just me and Lucy, who stood in the hallway, tail stiff, as if she knew something monumental had just shifted. I drove myself to the hospital. Every contraction was a memory. Every mile was a confession. I didn't scream in labor. I didn't cry. I clenched my teeth and breathed through the pain, because pain by then had become familiar, predictable, even deserved. He was born at 6:21 a.m., 6 pounds, 7 ounces, healthy, quiet, wide-eyed, with Mark's chin and Aiden's exact eyebrows. I named him Nathaniel, meaning God has given. But in that quiet room under dim lights, surrounded by nurses who called me Mama and smiled like I was whole, I had never felt so broken. There were no visitors, no flowers, no one waiting to see him through the nursery glass. Just me, and a silence so thick it curled around my throat. That evening I texted the kids. He's here. His name is Nathaniel. I wanted you to know. No response for hours. Then, late that night, a single photo came through. Sienna holding Nathaniel, Aiden beside her, smiling weakly, and standing just behind them, out of focus but unmistakable, Mark. I stared at the photo for minutes, hands shaking. They had come, without telling me. They had visited my son without me. It was then that I realized they weren't returning because they forgave me. They weren't there for me at all. They were there for him, for Nathaniel. The next morning, the nurse said, "Your daughter stopped by last night. She left this." It was a stuffed elephant, gray, worn around the ears, the same one Sienna had as a child. Tied to its ear was a note. He didn't ask to be born into this. He deserves everything good. I held the elephant close and tried not to cry, because I understood now. My family wasn't rebuilding itself around me. They were building a ring around my son without letting me in. And maybe that was what true consequence looked like. Not rage, not screaming, but being left out of the circle, even as it forms right in front of you. February bled into March like one long, sleepless day. The house no longer echoed. It whispered. Soft cries in the night, diaper changes, bottles warmed with shaky hands, and sometimes the sound of almost calling Mark, almost asking for help, almost pretending this wasn't all my fault. But I didn't call, and he didn't offer. Then, on a Friday morning in early March 8th, I think, there was a knock at the door. I froze. Lucy didn't bark. When I opened it, Mark stood there. No flowers, no apology, just a takeout bag in his hand and exhaustion in his eyes. "I figured you hadn't eaten," he said. I moved aside. He stepped in. That was the first time we shared a meal since the divorce. We didn't talk about us. Not once. Just about Nathaniel, his sleep schedule, the formula brand that worked best, how he already curled his fists like Aiden used to when he got fussy. Mark stayed for 3 hours that night, and then he came back the next, and the next. By April it was routine. He'd come straight from work, hold the baby while I cooked, sometimes bring dinner himself. We'd trade off burping and diapers. He'd leave before midnight, always with the same words. "Text me if he cries too long." But never once did he sleep over. Never once did he reach for my hand. And I didn't dare reach for his. People started noticing. My neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, asked if we were working things out. I smiled. We're co-parenting. Inside, I wanted to scream. I don't know what we're doing. I just don't want to lose the small piece of him I still have. Even the kids began to soften. Sienna would drop by after classes, bring little outfits, fold laundry while watching Nathaniel nap. Aiden helped install blackout curtains in the nursery. They never stayed long, but they came, and that, for me, was everything. Still, there were boundaries. Unspoken, but sharp. Mark never touched me unless it was to pass the baby. Sienna never called me Mom, unless Nathaniel was around. Aiden never asked how I was. I didn't push, because I knew this was grace, not reconciliation, not healing, just the barest thread between what I had and what I'd ruined. One night, after Nathaniel had finally gone down without a fight, Mark stood at the front door, keys in hand, coat half buttoned. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, but instead he asked, "Do you need anything tomorrow?" "No," I whispered. "We're good." He nodded. "Okay." And then, as he turned to leave, I said, too quietly, "I miss you." He didn't stop. He didn't respond. He just walked into the night, and the door clicked shut like the end of a sentence I didn't get to finish. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, listening to Lucy whine gently beside me, and I thought maybe this was all I'd ever get. Not love, not redemption, just proximity. A man who once adored me, now showing up for our son, but never for me again. And I couldn't even blame him, because deep down, I didn't know if I would have taken me back either. May 2024. The baby just turned 3 months old. He smiles now, big, gummy grins that melt every wall inside me. He coos when the sun hits his bassinet just right. He kicks when I read to him in the morning. And sometimes when I whisper I'm sorry against his forehead, he falls asleep like he forgives me without knowing what I've done. Mark comes by most evenings, always punctual, always calm. But now he doesn't sit. He stays standing, feeds the baby, changes one diaper, then quietly leaves. His eyes are gentle with Nathaniel, not with me. We no longer talk about the past. We also never talk about the future. He's moved on. I can feel it in the way he brushes past me like I'm furniture, in the way his ring is gone and there's no indentation where it once was. I heard from a mutual friend last week. He's seeing someone, a woman from his office. Quiet, sweet, never married. She hasn't met Nathaniel yet, but she will, and I'll have to be okay with that. Sienna still calls once a week. She doesn't say, "I forgive you," but she lets me send her photos. She asks how Nathaniel's doing. She tells me when she has midterms. And once, just once, she texted, "You were still a good mom. You just weren't a good wife." I stared at that message for hours, because it was the closest thing to grace I'd been given. Aiden is slower to come around. He hasn't said much, but he drops off groceries once in a while, leaves them on the porch. No note. Just enough to say, "I haven't forgotten you exist." That's more than I deserve. And me? I've stopped waiting for redemption. Stopped fantasizing about waking up and finding everything back the way it was. I know that fantasy is just another way of running from the truth. The truth is, I broke something sacred. Not just a vow. Not just a marriage. I broke the version of myself that was worthy of their love. And now I'm learning how to live with the woman who remains. It's not glamorous. It's not inspiring. But it's real. I take care of my son. I keep the house warm. I pay my bills. I wake up at 3 a.m. with a bottle in my hand and shame in my chest. And I still sing to him like I'm whole. Because he deserves a mother who tries, even if I will never again be the wife Mark once believed in. To those who might stumble upon this story and think she deserved what she got, I won't argue. You're probably right. To those who say one mistake doesn't define a person, I wish that were true. But some mistakes don't just define you. They replace you. So if you're reading this and you're standing at the edge of a lie you haven't told yet, a temptation you haven't followed through on, a text you haven't sent, don't. Because there are some doors you open that never close again. And no matter how many lullabies you sing afterward, you'll never silence the sound of the one who walked away.